Okay, so I'm trying to figure out where exactly we ended, and I was trying to see if inventory was mapped. Okay, so it looks like we do have inventory mapped, which means that we can return to our store object. Oh, updates everywhere. And begin to work on connecting the store with the inventory for the store. Okay. So in our store.java, we have only, at this point, the primary fields, store ID, emp name, and address. Yes? No, the lower uppercase does not seem to matter. Let me double check. Oh, I believe you. It just reminded me that I didn't have my MySQL window open, which I probably ought to have. All right, so make sure I've got my databases here. Henry Books. Oh, I made it the long one, didn't I? Okay, so we use Henry Books _ IS 294. Yeah. Right. So lowercase s is yeah. Well, no reason not to follow it, but no, I don't think it does not appear to make any difference because we were successful in pulling our stores. All right. So what I did to end up being able to persist the collection was to create a link in the store object. So I've got a private list of inventory elements, which I called book INV, which wasn't terribly exciting variable name, but at least be consistent in my notes here. So we've got we're going to connect then each store to its inventory, but that will require first of all an import for our list object, Java util list, and then it will require the mapping of said. So if we look at inventory, book INV, which is why I called the list what I did, we describe the book inventory, and this does have the auto increment, and then book ID, store ID, and this was also the reason for the foreign key, which is what's being indicated there on the store ID that was in the script when we built it. I think that was version 2 of the script. Yeah, oh, it doesn't have that. So there was on Blackboard, a version 2 script for the Henry Books database, which declared that, yeah, so it's on the project, and it should, Okay. Yeah. So version 2. Let's make sure. I'm just going to make sure that I did make that. That was my change in version 2. Publisher, book list. Yeah, book inventory. Foreign key, store ID references stores. Store ID. Yeah. All right. Okay. So in terms of the annotation, this is a one-to-many relationship. So at one-to-many, and fetch equals fetch type eager is what I went with. And what I discovered, well, let's do the import so we get the persistence one-to-many, persistence fetch type. What I discovered is that because I was closing the session in my DBs, so my store DB, I think as we have it, has a session close on its finally clause. That had an impact on having to do the eager, which causes the connection, the records to be read immediately. When the session closed, I would periodically get an error that the default lazy fetch wouldn't work because there was no session associated with it. So there is some more study that I need to do on the notion of the sessions and when to close them and when not to close them. But fetch type eager seemed to solve that problem. Correct. Right, right. Okay, and then we need the join column designation, and that is store ID. And that will require another import. And then there will be one more item coming, but I'm going to leave it out for now to show you the effect. But we should be able to obtain the book inventory with this annotation through the store DB. Let me check my notes for just a second and see if there was anything else I might be missing. User DB inventory, that looks okay. Store DB. Okay. Open server utility. Okay, so let's see now if we can update our application so that the display inventory, the view inventory servlet, is now able actually it won't even have to be the servlet, I don't think, is now able to process the inventory for the store just with the call to the store fetch. So what I have on the view inventory servlet we have our list of stores that came off of, well actually, so it's even back in the logon servlet. So the logon servlet now, which is pulling the stores, it does the store db get stores call, should have the data there so that after the store selection, where they're choosing one of the items from the drop-down, and we go to the view inventory, we assign a specific store ID, or we get a specific store ID from the input form, and we find that store in our collection of stores, and we make that the current. So we assign store st to the session, and we're going to move on to the inventory. The default is to go to the view inventory screen. But let me see. I think we do need to yeah, okay. So we need to do one other thing. I don't think we did it originally in our store object. So the store.java, which now has, we hope as a result of JPA, a list of inventory objects called book INV, we need to have a way of giving that back out of the store object. So I think that's the method we're missing. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's here. So on the store object, we will have a public method that returns the list of inventory items called getStoreINV, or at least that's what I called it. And its only task is to return the book INV object. Just looking through, I think sorry. Do we not? Oh, there it is. So we have the sets for address, name, the employee count, and we have the also for the ID, I think. Yeah. Okay. So everybody have that update to your store.java object. And I am in fact missing one of my documents. We'll see if we can manage it. So the view inventory page has a for each. So the only thing I need to change here, the old application called it, the database to read the inventory items after the store had been selected, and it created a list of inventory items called inventory. So I have changed that name, but we should have on the store, now we have store inventory, get store inventory, which returns the list of inventory objects. So I'm hoping that in the View Inventory JSP page, all we have to change is the items collection that we're using to retrieve and the data. So it'll be the store object that we put on the session and get store INV, but of course we throw away the get and store becomes lowercase and then INV was uppercase. So I think this is now our collection in the way I've rewritten store. I can still put it into an INV object and then use that object to display this information. Sort of. Right. I think we're okay without doing anything special in the servlet. So let's see if this in fact will still retrieve our inventory and display it on the screen. And because we're still up above, we're using store ID and store name, and so that's all okay. The user is still all okay. So let's see if I am right about the minimal changes that we need here. Right. So the JSP, by having it be a list, still works the same way it did before with the for each. Okay, so we had a 1, 2, 3, 4 with 1, 2, 3 as one of our admin users. Logon did get to Henry on the Hill for 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I view edit inventory, now I have a little bit of a problem, which is a problem I'm going to leave for you to fix. And that is, I'm missing some data here because inventory must also capture its related fields, title and price, but I am at least getting store, book code, and the quantity on hand for those books. Now let's see if that's right. That looks odd to me. Maybe that is right. If I do a select star from book INV where store ID is equal to 2, does that match up? Oh yeah, okay. I was seeing all those 10, 10, 10s, and I didn't think that was the right data, but I guess it is. And if we want, we can, oh, I don't have a return. So I'll just go backwards with my arrow. And if we choose a different one, let's choose Henry East Shore. Different set of inventory, which I'm assuming is correct. Yes. Really? All sorts of errors out there. Okay. Let me, yeah. So let me pause for a minute and see if we can fix some of the errors at hand. Pardon? Yes, that's right. Because you got to go a little deeper. There's a connection here on your inventory object, which has author, title, and price. So you're going to have to work on a little bit of your inventory object. But that's not where I want to go. Any luck? Oh, okay. What's the new one? Oh, you know what? No, this is the, we had to add the JSTL library. Yeah, look at your libraries and see if it's got JSTL added. Okay. So we're now going to do this very artificial increment process. And this is the page that I'm missing, so rats. But in the view inventory JSP, what I'm proposing is that we add a little button. I'm going to add it up here. When the user is an admin level, so everybody got View Inventory JSP up, and so I'm going to add a new action, form action. So the form is, according to the way I did it, inc for increment, so inc all books, increment all books, method equal post. And it's only going to have one entry in the form, a submit button that says increment inventory. So again, this was my very, very crude setup for showing the persistence of collections, a collection. So what we're going to allow now, and we probably ought to just do a quick test that it looks reasonable on our form. Doesn't have to be too fancy. Well, I thought I tried to run it. Come on, program. All right. Okay, increment inventory. So the idea is that this one process will add one to the quantity of every item in that list on the inventory side. So to make that happen, we will build a new servlet for increment all books. So on your servlets, right-click, new servlet, inc all books servlet, increment all books servlet. Okay, and we'll add our deployment, and don't forget to remove the word servlet from your URL pattern if you followed my naming in all respects here. So the process isn't too difficult from the inventory update in terms of the data that's on the session, because I'm just clearing out all of my usual items here. We will, I guess we'll have some of our usual string messages, string URL, and I'm just going to send it right back to the view inventory. JSP. And I am going to need, I think I'm going to need, at least the way I did it, a store ID, which is an integer. So I'm going to have that available. But the basic process, which we'll do in a try-catch, is to recover the store that was on the session. So store S. Let's see. I've been using a different name. Well, that's all right. Store S will be a cast into a store of the request, get session, get attribute, and the attribute is store, because that's what we put just before we called the view inventory. We put that object on the session. So we'll need to import business.store. And then, if we are in fact able, so if to retrieve that, so if S is not null, whoops, I hit the caps lock here. Okay. Then we're going to update the inventory, the units on hand, for every book that is a part of the book INV group that's in the store. Okay, so the code I've got is for each inventory object I in the s.getStoreInventory collection. And we do need an import for inventory as well. I just did it in, no, I did it in one step. Okay, so we're going to do an I set on hand. But what we're setting it to is the I get on hand plus 1. So that's easy enough. Now I have a few shortcuts here, which because we're just trying to demonstrate the process. So after, whoops, I guess still inside my if, but after the 4 has processed, I am going to ask for a new Hibernate call that I'll have to write to persist the store S. So my message that comes back will be storedb dot, and we're going to write, instead of get stores, we're going to write persist store S. Well, save, basically. Yeah, we're going to, so we updated the memory object. Now we're going to, we hope, write that data to the database. So this, I'm going to stop right here. Well, we'll do the, yes. Okay, so I'm doing my import for storedb, but we don't have persist store yet. So let's go to StoreDB and see if we can write the necessary method. So this will be a public static string, because I'm going to send some kind of message back to them. So I'm calling this persist store, which receives a store object. Now the session factory and session equal null is the same as above. So we're going to grab those two lines from our get method. All right. And I also then am going to have a string, which is my return message. So in the try catch, I'm going to get my session equals session factory open session. And we're going to do this as a transaction because it's a save with a one-to-many file relationship. So session begin transaction, and I'm going to use the merge call to merge S back into the database. And then we'll get transaction and commit. And we hope to have this message come back: store s dot get store ID updated. But if we catch any exception E and the session is not null, oh, keep hitting my caps lock tonight. Then we have to roll back, so we got to do a session, get transaction, rollback. And we'll change our message to store persist error. But the finally then is to close the session. And we eventually return message. Oops, what did I do? Oh, I'm outside my, can't do my return outside of my method. Okay. So that almost fits. It does fit. Okay. Store comes in. It's got the updated data for inventory. We start a transaction. We merge the store. We commit the transaction, and we hope all is well. Otherwise, we roll it back and tell them did not work. Oh, inventory. The Oh, on the view inventory, yeah. Do I need to go back to StoreDB for some folks? Yep. Are we okay on? Okay. So the StoreDB persist call looks like this. Now, I did have an interesting issue come up in that after a successful persist, I wasn't necessarily, or after, no, it was after a failed persist. I have a problem in that my memory object for the store has been updated, but a fail on the persist means that that update that I'm seeing in terms of the memory items didn't get put in the database. So my simple solution to that will go back into the servlet, and I'm going to refresh, but there's not a refresh technique exactly, but I'm going to refresh the specific store that I was working on. But that's going to require one other thing. Let's, while we're here in the StoreDB, I want to be able to reload a specific store. Everyone okay on the persist side? All right. So we've got get stores, and we're going to modify it to get store and have an ID come in. So in fact, let's just, I'm going to take the guts of this, and we'll modify that. So I'm going to put it above the persist. So we're going to have a public static, oh, come on, why does that keep popping up? Public static store. So this one is only going to return a single store. Get store after a store ID comes in. So I'm going to copy in my code and fix as needed. So I'm not going to have a list of stores. I'm going to have a single store object called store. And on your query, this is where we need to add the where clause. So where store ID equals SID, our parameter value. We'll create the query and then do a q.setInteger SID. So this is how we, in Hibernate, we're going to set the integer into the query for the store ID. And then here, we're going to have not stores, but store equals q dot, and we expect a unique result. And so that was the recommendation of the Just Hibernate book. So unique result, but we have to cast it. It's not comfortable doing it automatically for us. So we're going to call for the query to return a unique result of a type store object into our store. If we receive an exception, store will be null, and we will return store. So mostly that involved the plural list of stores being just a singular store now. Okay. So far, so good. In fact, what doesn't it like? Up above on line 38, did you declare a single store object called lowercase store? The list? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to do this in a couple of steps here. Back to the increment all books servlet. If we're ready. Are we ready? Yes? No? Maybe? I see mostly yeses. Okay. Increment all books servlet. For the moment, I'm going to leave out my refresh logic and just finish out my try catch. So let's see, that's the if. The catch comes down here. So if we catch an exception E, then, if I could spell it, exception E, then my message will be inventory update error, or we'll say inventory increment error. And we'll add the message that it gave us. But that should be about all we have to do for our first round, which will end in abject failure, but that's all right. So do a set attribute message onto the request object, and find from one of your other servlets your request dispatcher lines of code. So I'm going to grab that from my, oh, come on, log on. What is going on here? There we go. Request dispatcher, dispatcher forward. So in my increment books servlet, which goes back to the view inventory, I think I now have enough to test to see our first problem. And what I'm hoping that I see is that the collection persistence will fail, even though it says that it worked. It won't work. And I'm going to see the wrong data because my memory object has not been updated. Okay, that's what I hope first time. Then we'll fix the memory object, so we're actually seeing the correct, even though it's going to tell us that the persist worked and it didn't. And then we'll show you what we left out to cause the persist not to work. Cross your fingers. We've only got 10 minutes left. I think we can get it done. Okay, so run the program. I like the Henry Downtown inventory a little. No, I don't. Yeah, it's got more varied numbers. Okay, so here we are. We hope that the increment inventory will get us to the servlet, and it'll try to increment. Okay, so it said store 1 updated. Quantities showing definitely were increased. However, go to your MySQL window. Select star from book inventory where store ID equals 1. And you will note that it did not, in fact, persist the inventory back to the database, because we're seeing 0, 1, 2, 3, whereas we're now seeing 1, 2, 3, 4. And if in fact you go back and ask for that data again, it's not deleting. It's not deleting my object. Let's go all the way back and let's see. I may have to close and reload. Oh, there it is. So I went all the way back, re-authenticated, and it's now reading the correct inventory, even though it says that it's able to increment. Okay. So first problem is, if it failed, it thinks it succeeded, but if it failed in any way, we ought to refresh. So the refresh code that I use, and we're back in the increment servlet, after an is, or after a persist store s, I went as follows. SID equals, I guess I didn't really need SID after all. I did an s.getStoreID. I could have, and then I went, I asked to reset my S using storedb getStore for that specific ID. And then I simply placed it back on the session. In other words, I updated. So what's actually going on, and Hibernate is obscuring this, is that our memory location is now wrong for the actual store data, I think. But anyway, if we do a request, get session, set attribute, so we reset our store object S now onto the session under the store name. I think we'll at least see the failure. But the question is, what's going on? Why is it failing and not even recognizing that it's failing? So Right. It's not. Okay, so I'm going to run it once more. Choosing my downtown. So there's the inventory as I know it to be. I try to increment, and it says it updated it, but nothing changed because it wasn't in fact changed in the database. Okay, so at least I'm still seeing the correct information, even though I'm getting the wrong message. And this is a little strange to me, but the fix is understandable, but I wish it had told me, I wish it was giving me more of an error message. It thinks it's okay. So what we left out, which should fix our final problem here, is that in the declaration of storedb, store itself, store.java, when we define the one-to-many relationship and the join column, we also need to add a cascade call. So, at cascade type dot all. And we import the persistence. Now wait a minute, did I import? Now here you want to import the Hibernate cascade and cascade type, not the persistence. So cascade, and then from Hibernate, and then the Hibernate cascade type. So that turned out to be the missing link to tell it, when you're updating, go through the entire list of inventory objects and do the same. Yes. Well, no, I'm not sure that it did. That would take some more testing. I think I would still leave the refresh steps in the servlet. But let's run it and see if we do in fact get an update. Here comes our cascade all. Ooh, one says it updated, and it seems to have refreshed with an update if you double check in your database. They are in fact updated. Yeehaw. So it does, it makes it pretty easy. I got to admit, yeah, and I agree with several of you, like Mr. Ewan, who said, wouldn't it be nice to be able to get it at a more granular level here? But Hibernate's in a sense just doing a little bit too much for us, and I want to be able to mess with it underneath the hood. Yeah, yeah. Okay, we made it. Well, that's all I have for you on this one. The rest is up to you. Right. Well, JPA is not over because we're going to do Hibernate again on the Struts project. So it'll be a Struts with Hibernate project starting next week. So that's right. So the database, the object relational mapping, the database to servlet stuff is still going to happen with Hibernate. Struts adds a different kind of level of our framework on top of how you manage your app. Yes, you should put the links in. I didn't put the links in, but you should have them. And of course, the first thing you're going to have to figure out is, hey, how do I get my title and my price back? That's probably the easy part. And then I think there's the one step, the update step, that also has to be put in play. Yes. Yeah. That's how I would approach it. I'd look for object mapping again with annotations to bring back the title and the retail price. Yeah. So see what you can do with it over the next week while I prepare your first Struts, or there's only going to be one, so it'll be a Struts project that will incorporate JPA as well. Well, there are several things on the spec. So if you check the spec, there's some additional steps that we didn't talk about that you need to start working on. But just let me know how it goes over the next week or two, and we'll see. I'm sorry, you wanted to see which? StoreDB, yeah. The get store or the persist? Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks very much.